everybody. I apologize for my delay. Time is 6:04. Call the meeting to order and request a roll call.
Okay, Mr. Oliva?
Present.
Mrs. Condon? Present. Dr. Page?
Present.
Mr. Abrahamson?
Present.
Mrs. Donovan? Present. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Present.
Mrs. Quinney?
She is stuck in traffic, so she's going to have a delayed arrival.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I'd just like to inform you I'm videotaping this evening's meeting.
Thank you very much. Please note for the record, Mr. Bishop is videotaping the meeting tonight. Okay. Well, the purpose of this meeting tonight is a budget work session to discuss the superintendent's proposed FY16 budget and, if necessary, as it relates to the current budget or any issues that you may have to deal with. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. For the school committee, I just wanted to say thank you to the principals for all of their hard work in building this budget at the school-based level first. And all of the meetings that we've had with Aaron, the finance director, it has been a collaborative effort for sure. And one that, as I present, I recognize is a significant increase, but one that we feel is justified given our AIP, the conditions in which we work under for implementing the accelerated improvement plan. So for the first slide, what I have for you is what we've received in fiscal year 15. And then basically two ideas. One is the level service or zero growth budget, which is right now at 2.64% increase. In other words, just to open doors with increases in salary and requirements for things like NEAS that are coming up to high school. That represents, in our estimation, 2.64% increase to the budget. And so the last line you're looking at is the needs-based budget, which is after collaboration at all of the school with the ILTs and principals. The needs of the district are represented by a 7.52% increase. Okay. We will get into all of the details of the principals. I think are prepared today to talk about what their specific needs are at the building levels. So the next slide you're seeing are some of the financial implications of decisions that have been made in Southbridge over the past 4 years. The overall school budget increase of $2,482,768 over the past 4 years represents $620,692, which represents 2.6% per year increase. However, the Chapter 70 increase of $2,435,716 represents $608,929 per year, represented by 3.53% per year increase, which really relates to the issue I think before us, which is the town share of the increase of $47,053, which is 0.20% over the past 4 years. So the next slide is a big picture history slide. So this is sort of representative of the last slide, but in a spreadsheet form. And so I think one of the issues that is of concern is the fluctuating town share of the budget picture, which in 2013 was a 3% increase, in 2014 was a 1.5% decrease, 2015 1.7 increase, and proposed this year from the town is a 2.3% decrease. As you can see, Chapter 70, the lines above, the history has been steady increases, with the exception of 2014, which was a significant increase, and that's the same year that the town share had a decrease. So that's a lot to take in on one slide, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to have Aaron answer now. Okay. So we did a net school spending comparison to other districts, which is not in the PowerPoint. Katie had added this this afternoon at our request. So the blue line on the graph.
Is that this one?
Yes. Oh, it's
It's this
there,
one, it's
okay, sorry. So it is the net
Sorry, I thought
school
you said that.
spending. No, that's the no. So we are well below the average of the state. 2014 in particular, 17. Is the net school spending, and then we're at 3.5. And then the net school comparison levels to other districts who are level 4 districts. So we did not choose, with the exception of Oxford, Salem, and Randolph are districts that are performing at level 4 and are under accelerated improvement plans. So you can see the significant difference in net school spending in Southbridge versus other level 4 districts. Yep.
Jared, a quick question. Do you have the numbers for 2015 for the net school spending comparison?
I do not here, I would have to go see if they are
Or 15?
available. I don't think they're
Th-
available.
This wouldn't be out until the end of the year, until the year
Okay.
ends, yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
thought-
So it wouldn't come out until after probably end of year reports are put in.
Okay.
That's when all that would be uploaded, yeah.
I just interrupt one second, I'm very sorry, you're doing a great job. For Julianne, I just want to send around a sign-in sheet, so those, would that be helpful to you?
Yeah, fill the spellings and names and
Yeah.
so forth, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That'd be great, thank you.
Just a sign-in sheet if needed, for those who are not school committee. Sorry about that.
School committee also.
So that's the net school spending comparison. And again, the concern that, Southbridge is a level 4 district. We're working under an AIP. There are significant resource allocations that are required under that. If we want to improve and move off of level 4, really, quite frankly, the funding has to be there. District student enrollment, those are the figures for enrollment over time and the per pupil cost expenditures. And we break that out in the next couple of slides for you. The next couple of slides get into students with disabilities, our percent of students with disabilities versus the state average. And then our students are English language learners, and the significant percent of students above the state average. And those, again, are additional resources that are needed to support those student needs, which are unique. Those range from anywhere from curriculum resources to reduced class sizes, to increased staff numbers, to more time on learning for ELL learners. Our level 1 learners require 2.5 hours of instruction. Those are all additional requirements for a student population that is different than the state average and requires more funding. So the next slide is the district budget needs. And this is basically a cover sheet for the next slides that will be more specific to each of the schools. So this is the sheet that represents the district-wide expenses, each school broken out. And the 2016 town budget column is the 2.64%. So again, that's your level service budget, 0 growth. If we do nothing else but open the doors, as we did this year, that's the budget figure we need just to open the doors. And then the 2016 needs budget is the 7.52%. And so we're going to get into a discussion right now about what those needs are. So the needs for governance under, whether it's legislative governance or accelerated improvement plan and accountability with ESSE, two of the big things that are coming are accreditation for the high school That's a significant expense. And it's a 2-year expense minimally, and that work will begin this summer. For the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we are responsible and required to begin to prepare our infrastructure and our students and our hardware and software for students who are going to be taking the PARCC test, and that will be the replacement for MCAS, and that is an online assessment in the best case scenario. So we have some upgrades to servers that you will see later in the budget. In addition, we have hardware needs so that our students not only are using hardware, Chromebooks, iPads, notebooks for assessments, but on a regular basis, so that they are comfortable in taking assessments online, so when they are ready for PARCC. Yes?
We are not upgrading servers. We've upgraded servers at the elementary schools. I apologize. This is money to upgrade network infrastructure. That is the wiring, the routers, the network closets. I just want to, because we did approve funding in this past year to upgrade the servers. I just didn't want the confusion with that.
Did I say servers?
Yeah.
Sorry, not
It's
servers.
okay.
Infrastructure, I try to stay with infrastructure. Okay. And then third is specific to the Accelerated Improvement Plan. We are required under the Accelerated Improvement Plan to review curriculum, write curriculum, and provide the resources to implement the curriculum. So last year, this summer I should really say, the National Geographic Reading Program was the result of the ELA curriculum review cycle. It was also a specific line item in the Accelerated Improvement Plan to pilot a literacy program at the elementary school. The curriculum committee felt after reviewing several products that National Geographic best fit the needs of our students. So we implemented that this year rather than pilot. Science textbooks are a need and have been a need, and that is this curriculum review cycle that's under process this year, moving forward. Focus on Results is the consultant that we're working with to unify our efforts around school improvement and our turnaround work, so that's a requirement under the Accelerated Improvement Plan. Interventionists are a requirement given our student achievement and our lack of progress with student achievement. Interventionists are needed to provide those direct supports to students that are not necessarily ELL students or special education students, but students that just need more direct instruction in order to stay on grade level. The Naviance software program for the high school, we are required under the AIP to focus on college and career readiness, to prepare students well for college or career. Naviance is a program that allows us to do that. It also allows us to provide some counseling to students around their college and career choices. And one of the goals at the high school is the reduction in dropout rates, so this is associated with ways to improve that or reduce that rate. It's also a way to track students and make sure that they're on target for graduation, and I know that the high school has done a good job of really analyzing that this early school year to make sure that students were scheduled appropriately. Naviance is the software that would allow that to happen more frequently and in a more coherent way. Professional development is always a need of a district, but particularly under the AIP, there are several instances where professional development specifically is noted, and that is something that needs to be funded. And then the Acela software at the elementary level is an intervention software for students, and something that's required. So the central office budget needs, just to go over with you, we did not participate in a town capital request process. I'm not exactly sure why that didn't happen, but we do have a capital need for network infrastructure upgrades at Eastford Road, Charlton Street School, West Street School, and those are around upgrading, as Aaron spoke to, the wiring and infrastructure to make classrooms available for wireless testing and things like PARC. The 120 Chromebooks and carts are directly related to preparing our students to take online assessments, the statewide ones, but also in our AIP to have students tested quarterly using a standardized assessment to show growth. And then, of course, training for all of that is important from a district perspective. So are there any questions about the central office needs? I'm going to turn it over to individual principals now, but, no? All right. So Eastwood Road.
Do you want me to just go for it one by one? Just the difference in the questions. Okay. Yeah, that's it.
Can we do Charlton Street
They're all,
first?
they're all
They're all
the
the
same.
same.
Yeah, they're all,
We can talk to what our needs are.
I think I have it on my computer.
I have the correct copies in my office, so
I have my copy too.
do you want to start talking about it?
Sure.
And I will copy you the correct.
Do you want me to go through everything, Cheryl, or just my needs? Like my-
Just the needs.
Okay.
Yep.
So all I'm really asking for at Eastwood Road are two things. My first request is for a special education teacher. We currently do not have one at the kindergarten level. And we are having a large influx of special needs students in preschool right now. So that is a great anticipated need for next year. And also, this year, we have students currently on individualized education plans. There are only 2 right now with academic goals, but there's a need for a special education teacher at our school. The second thing I'm asking for is a special educational assistant. And again, I'm just asking for one person, and that's for anticipated influx of a lot of children that are receiving early intervention that are coming to Eastwood Road now. So for an example, just this week, we had 2 students enrolled, special needs, 1 in our PASS program and 1 in our developmental program. And I just need an additional staff person. There are a lot more needs for Eastwood Road, but if this is the minimal that I would ask for, that I think the building needs to function.
Do you have an estimated cost of the salary for that?
For the sped teacher, we estimated $56,000, and for the educational assistant, $25,000. Thank you.
The other items that were on our preliminary budget paperwork, an interventionist and pen specialist, have those no more? Liaison, or-
Well, I would like all those things. Right now, I have 1 interventionist for 9 kindergarten classrooms. She's able to service 25 students at a time, but our need right now is 88 students. So all of our students that need intervention are not receiving it.
You have 1 interventionist for 88 students.
For 188
188
students.
students.
So out of 188 of our students, 88 of them are at risk for reading failure based on the assessments that we've done so far. And because we have the 1 interventionist, she can only service 25 students at a time. So until she works with those 25 students and they make progress out of the intervention group, we can't get the next level of children needing intervention service until we're servicing our most neediest students right now. So I would like another interventionist to help service the children who also need intervention. A half-time specialist, I put that in there because currently we have a guidance counselor that is he's doing character education classes half-time and doing guidance half-time. And I'm sure, as you know, throughout the district, they deal primarily with behavior. And we could use some support in the building to free up our guidance person. We still, even though it was approved, our family liaison, I still do not have a family liaison yet. I had 4 applicants, and the applicants that I received did not meet the criteria for, but I think that's a very, very big need at our school, because we're the feeding school into all other schools. We are the face of Southbridge Public Schools. It's the first experience all parents have, and we're not, I either have to pull our guidance counselor or take an EA away from a classroom that's supposed to be working with students to do translating. And we're even calling family liaisons from other buildings to cover meetings to translate special ed meetings. So it's very difficult to communicate with families without the liaison. And I would just even be looking for that person part-time. Permanent sub, we have no permanent sub at Eastford Road School. I call subs on a day-to-day basis. Just an example, I have a teacher out on medical right now for 6 weeks, and I have 6 subs that I call regularly to come in for that.
So if you have a classroom that is without a teacher and they may have a different person in front of them every day?
Yes. I do have a different person.
I have experienced that and how disruptive that is.
It's very disruptive.
And I saw what it did to the classroom. It happened to one of my daughters in first grade.
And that's just an example, so if someone does call in sick while I have a teacher out, the 11 iPads, that's just, I'd like 1 for every classroom. And the library books, we can scratch that, so that was actually a deduction. It was minus 2,000 there, I'm sorry. So that was not clear in my, but you can take 2,000 for the library books. So I feel like we really have a lot of need at Eastford Road School, but if I had to make a priority list, I think it goes without saying, we need a special education teacher and a special education educational assistant. Our special ed population is growing, and those students need support and service.
Just a quick question, you said that you have a position for your liaison currently in the
Yes.
budget, but it's not
Yes,
filled.
the school committee approved it, I want to say, back in November or December. So I have called and interviewed, and when it came down to checking references and credits, they're either not fluent in Spanish or not fluent in English. And our most recent applicant, just before February vacation, did not meet the minimum 2 years college requirement.
So, but, I guess my question is it budgeted for this year?
So it's budgeted now, yes.
Budgeted.
Yeah.
So then it does it need to be on this line?
Actually, it does not.
It was approved as an unbudgeted position.
Oh,
So it was not budgeted for this past year. It is not in our opening the doors budget, as the steady state.
So it is.
So it's included here because we have the position, but we don't have the funding to support it.
And I
I mean,
think,
so we can,
and I think when that was approved, we estimated, I think it was 17,000, so,
yeah, I mean,
and that was just for part-time, you know,
So it's a new request?
yes. Did I explain that well enough? I don't know what questions come.
I know that I asked this question at budget, but I have yet to have an answer. Under art, that was a full-time position. I mean, initially it was a part-time position. Last budget season, we made it a full-time position, but not solely at Eastford Road School. It is still a full-time position here at Eastford Road School. Now that we're doing the school-based budgets, I just need clarification on that.
Okay. So our art teacher, she works part-time.
Oh, not art, excuse me. I
Music.
apologize, music,
So
sorry,
our music, he's just the morning from 8:30 until 8:15 until 11:45 every day at Eastford Road. And then through the course of the week, in the afternoon, he shares Southbridge middle high school, and I believe part-time at Charlton Street and West to help out with band.
So that is in the Eastern Road School budget, but also supporting the other schools as well. So it's under your budget for Eastern Road School, but yet it is also going into the other budgets of the other schools. So that, to me, is just a bit of a concern. Because it just looks like you have more, you know, when it's being shared by the other schools as well. Just a thought.
So are you recommending that you put half the money in the Eastern Road budget and then split the other half among the other three schools?
We could, just to show that they're also getting
Just
support
allocate
in
appropriately.
music.
As we discussed in subcommittee, one of the things is, this is the first time that we have positional control over that. So we found quite a few of those errors and have corrected them. And so this is another one I think that, you know, rightfully needs to be corrected.
Are there any other questions from this group set?
So I, again, apologize, I had asked Katie to take some extraneous information out, and when she did that, she populated with the wrong graphs. So we've sent you black and white copies, however, they do have some of my chicken scratch on them, so I apologize for that. But those are the correct spreadsheets that should be in your packets. So it's also presented up here, thank you, Erin. So after Eastford Road, we have, okay, sorry, yep.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Transportation for field trips for Eastern Road School, $3,000. Does that include pre-K? Or is
Yes.
that's for both grades, pre-K and K?
That's for both, but this is new this year, that this year we're not taking a field trip, so I'm hoping that, I spoke with Aaron about this, if we could take a field trip every other year, just to save money.
Was pre-K grant funded field trip last year?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Because I know that they've always taken a field trip for pre-K.
Preschool, I would assume yes, because all of their money is separate.
So in regards to the transportation, I wasn't sure if we had funded the transportation and the grant funded the field trip. So,
That I don't know, I'm sorry, Jill, I don't know.
thank you, that was it.
Okay.
So Charlton Street, which actually is your,
So, coming into this school year, into 14-15, Charlton Street lost 4 full-time positions through one through attrition and 2 through cuts made to the school and 1 through a transfer up to the middle school, high school. So we're feeling the depth of those cuts as far as the instruction and the ability to do our intervention the way it used to be done. So what we're asking for is 1 full-time RTI teacher to supplement that, so that we can get back onto the level where we were last year. And then 2 part-time RTI teachers. And the hope of this was that we could utilize part-time teachers to cut down on the full-time costs of employment and unemployment insurance and things like that. So they're putting 2 part-time teachers in there to help share that, but give us the support that we needed as well in the classrooms. And the last item on there is a behavior interventionist. And we applied for a grant this year, and we were pretty confident that we might have gotten it, but then at the last minute, the governor cut the funding for the grant, and we lost that grant. And that was going to be for a behavior interventionist to be shared between the buildings, because we're still seeing a lot of behavior that's taking time from the administrators and taking time from our teachers in the classrooms to deal with that. So having somebody full-time that could be able to do behavior plans and consult on behavior and things like that was the idea behind that share. If you look on the left-hand side, I don't know if you talked about this when I was out of the room, but those little numbers where it says priority, and we went in and we decided what our priorities were. We labeled them a 1 or a 2. So our full-time RTI teacher would be our full-time priority, would be our first priority, and then the other two positions would be our second priority.
Thank you. Any questions, Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Latoy. This RTI teacher, would that teacher float amongst grades 1 through 5, or is it specialized for a certain grade level?
No, they actually float between all grade levels, the RTI positions that we have now. So they work with different grade levels throughout the whole day.
So
they support
would they
that.
get their direction from the IRSs or from the principal? Like, how
No.
does that dynamic work?
Right now, what happens is the RTI teachers consult with the grade level teams during our collaboration time, usually at the end of the day.
Okay.
And they work together with them and they pinpoint what groups they are. You'll see more of this when we do our presentation next week, but how we pinpoint who's in what group and what data we're looking at. And then those interventionists work with the groups with the grade level teachers. And they're under the direction of the IRSs ultimately, because they're the ones who take the data and disseminate it to the teams and work with the teams on that. But ultimately, it's the team levels and those RTI teachers that come up with what specific needs are for those grade levels and work on them.
Okay, so I'm just trying to make sure, would this person actually stand in front of a classroom, or is it more of a direction of gathering data from the IRS?
No, this is another teacher, another full-time RTI teacher that would make those groups smaller.
Addressed.
So that we can, as it is right now, our groups are pretty large, losing the support that we had. So what we found in our school visits to Worcester, when we went to Worcester, and looking at other districts that have been successful in coming out of level 4 and getting to level 3, level 2, and level 1, is that RTI, that intervention groups, and that putting the money into people and putting smaller groups in front of the students and working with those students individually, pinpointing what their needs are. Some of the software that we're using next year, the map assessments, are going to have that ability in there as well, so that when we map test the students, it's going to come back with these students need to work here, these students need to work here, and what standards they're low on.
Yep.
And then we can plug those right into our interventionists and have them go in and work with those students.
Okay.
So this is definitely hands-on. This would not be any sort of, anything you see there isn't really, even the behavior interventionist. When I speak with Laurie Dunleavy, who was that position years ago, she saw over 80 students in our building on a weekly basis, and actually got in front of those 80 students on a weekly basis, and then that position was cut from the budget as well. But that's a pretty complex task to see 80 students on a weekly basis, but she said that she had a great handle on them and knew what their needs were and was able to describe that to the teachers.
So your second priority as far as the 2 part-timers, basically doing the same type of thing, but figure it would be cost-effective to have 2 part-timers versus 1.
Right.
That's just the rationale for that, but the job would be the same.
Same exact job, they'd be in front of the students, that would be their whole job, would be in front of the
Okay.
students.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. How many do you have currently?
RTI?
Yeah.
4.
You have 4 now? And no part-time?
No. And what we did was, one of those RTI, we have taken and utilized into technology, a technology piece, so that the students are actually getting technology as part of their RTI, so that they're rotating through the computer lab during that RTI block. And every student is being exposed to the computers once a week to learn how to log on, to learn how to open a document, how to save a document, how to go online and search for things, how to use our website and all of the websites that are listed on our website. So what we've done is incorporate that in there as well. So even with the less amount of teachers, we were able to beef that up. And they're doing writing on the computers, they'll do some writing samples on the computers, they're doing some math. And the STAR testing that they were doing this year was during that RTI block in there as well. So it's become very useful time.
Anybody else?
I just thought of another question, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, maybe to Aaron, is there any type of grant funding for this type of specific, I'm thinking
We
Title I that's
yes.
specific to response to intervention?
We already have a number of staff on the Title I grant. If you look at on your budget sheets, there is a salary line item in each column, just like you see there, there's a Title I and II. you'll see a number of teachers are funded on the Title I grant. I believe Bill has 5 or 6 teachers who are fully funded on that Title I grant. You know, it's,
Is
to
there
some
any more
degree,
room
we,
to
you
fund
know.
more? Is there any more room to fund more via, you know, using that as a
We
mechanism
can
to
try.
fund that?
We've talked about the pains of funding staff positions on grants. We lose 10% to MTRS, so they pull 10% of that amount, that salary amount, out of your grant to go towards MTRS, I think.
Is that a
some-
totality or per employee?
It's in total, so whatever your salary number ends up being, they're pulling. So if you have 500,000, they're taking 50,000 out for MTRS.
Okay.
Even though we already pay into MTRS, it's already accounted for. I have no idea why they do it. It's just one of those. It's the reason we moved all salaries off of the 240 grant. The 240 grant is far more flexible, so we were able to make that swap very easily. And you recall, we mentioned that we saved about $50,000 towards Fed to use for other resources. The challenge is Title I is far less flexible. You can only use it on more or less extra items,
Yes,
as opposed to core items. And so much is core to us,
yes.
but the one thing that's core to us that we can kind of put on it is teaching, is intervention. So we have a number of teachers. We can look at putting more teachers on there, but then something drops off. So it's kind of a, you know.
And then just looking down the road, if portions of that grant get depleted or cut, then the district is left to absorb the salaries of those teachers if we still, you know, have
Yes.
a need for them.
So we are confident that our current, if the Title I grant were to be cut, we're confident that the number of teachers we have on there will not exceed the amount of grant funding we get. If we were to leverage the entire grant, we would raise flags with them on salaries. Then if they were to cut that grant, then we would have to deal with the repercussions of that. So I think we are at a sweet spot. We could look at, you know, leveraging a little more on salaries, but it's a bit of a catch-22 because of the 10%, and what are we losing for doing that?
All right, thank you very much, Erin. Thank you, Madam Chair, also.
So we are on Charlton Street School. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Latoy? Any additional questions?
So we were in pretty decent shape staffing wise. We leave a few paraprofessional positions vacant, not in the budget, so we reduce the salary that way. It's not budgeted, but that's one of the key pieces. I'm not asking for additional staff at this point with teaching. We might have some programmatic shifts as we do our school career plan, but it's with existing staff. The things we're looking for at West Street School are more professional development. We're looking for to do some standards-based best practices, differentiated instruction, and collaboration, meeting, how to make them better. Our focus there, the group I'd like to work with is Rebus Associates out of Westwood. That's a request, the 10,000, that's one of our top tier items. Looking at a social emotional curriculum for tier 1, so all students would have that. If we had a kit for every other teacher, so 2 teachers share each grade level, it would cost about $4,000. It's about a 15-minute day curriculum we do. You kind of do a morning meeting with it. It's focused on self-esteem and other kind of factors that contribute to school success. So that's about $4,000 for West Street. We're going to do some other reading testing. You know, Dibbles, we're still going to use Dibbles, but Dibbles is limited. It's really focused on oral reading fluency, so we're looking at the DRA. And for a kid, it costs about $2,000 for what our IRS is we're asking. It's not a top tier item, but it's something that would help do some diagnostic work to help the math, to help the Dibbles. Excel is something we already talked about in the district budget. I think we scaled up to the district level, not just our school, but for West Street alone, it would cost about $5,000 for the licenses we need, but I know that's something on our slide now. And there's another training for myself and my assistant principal to do some other breakthrough coach. It's only $600 a person. It's about being a more effective administrator, how to have assistant be your secretary, to try to be more efficient. So those are our requests at this point.
Does anybody have questions for Mr. Reedy? So, just a question, so you comfortable with the staffing level that you have there
I
now?
think so, yeah, we might make some shifts programmatically, and people might do something a little bit different, like we might have an ESL teacher do a little something different, you know, if we have 3, if Charles Street has 2, things like that, I might use that person like the technology role. You don't have that per se, but I think we need with existing staff or existing personnel.
Do you have a permanent sub in your building?
We have 2. And they're key because it's hard to find day-to-day subs, I don't know why it's so hard, but we're really struggling.
Anything else? No?
Thank you, Madam, through you. And I'm not sure if the superintendent can answer this. I just want to know why West Street School needs an academic dean.
So that's one of the programmatic shifts I would use. I actually think I would like to use that out of guidance in a similar role to that behavior specialist, the person that I have there currently. I don't, you know, the background, because I'll stand and talk to, but I use that person a lot in intervention with kids. In the same role that Bill was talking about, is needed Charles Street. I use her in that kind of role. But I would see doing some similar things like that. Almost a student support center, I don't know some of the parents, you know, some of the people with me have seen me in the office in the little timeout room I have there. And she supports me in that way, and I'd like to be a little bit more proactive and less reactive with that to provide support. So since that person's been there and they haven't been there all year, they've been able to help me do some tiered interventions with kids who are needy. As you know, we have a lot of needy kids, some are on special ed plans, some are not. So it's been being responsive and being more proactive to keep kids in class and learning rather than doing discipline and being reactive, which takes a lot more time.
Just to follow up on that. My only concern is, I mean, I get the behavior and intervention, but we have a principal, assistant principal, guidance counselor, and academic dean, all trying to deal with the behavior of the students, which is a big chunk of salary for administration rather than kind of learning time. I do understand that position of interventionist, but I just think that this is something that we need to look at in regards to positioning and time of child teaching.
So I would only advocate, just for my own 2 cents, I think that we actually probably need 2 guidance counselors, honestly, to meet the level of need. So that's how I would use that person. So if that person wasn't there and he changed the position, I would be at the table for a guidance counselor in a similar role as behavior specialist, because I think we're not meeting the level of need for our kids.
In just in response to last year's budget discussions, they talked about having an assistant principal opposed to a guidance counselor and eliminating that guidance counselor position. So in my 2 years sitting on the school committee, you just hear those conflicting opinions, and it's very frustrating from a school committee perspective. Thank you.
So I think, if I can for a minute, part of that, assistant principal position is the need for evaluation. With 40 staff members to effectively evaluate and to be in the classrooms and to be able to be coaching and to make sure the instruction is where it needs to be. You need somebody else for that for those evaluations, and it has to be an assistant principal position because of the union. So that's the need for that, and that person has turned out to be a huge help as far as lightening the load of the guidance, as far as removing, I don't want to say disciplinary, because it's not so much disciplinary as much as it is intervention. On our level, we've tried to make it more intervention and more of creating an environment that is more nurturing and that we can handle that. One of the things we've talked about as well is using that position there, that dean position between the 2 schools. She's come over and helped us out when we've been shorthanded or when one person's been out of the building, that sort of thing. So, we're looking at that through the end of the year as well, as really making the most out of that position so that it's effective in both locations. And I think, one of the biggest things is just looking at the needs of our students. And if you look at a lot of other level 4 districts and a lot of districts that have the same demographics as we do, they have wraparound service individuals who are in the district and that are creating wraparound service plans for these students, and they're going more into the homes. We're getting in the homes when we can, but these people are coordinating services with counselors outside, with physicians, and with all outside agencies. And there's usually, I know when we went to Worcester, there was one just for that school who specifically worked as that wraparound specialist and did that. So I think when we're looking at the needs of our students and we're looking at creating a nurturing environment, that's something that we really need to do as we're getting the community more involved. And, you know, it might not be on a long-term basis, it might be as we get that environment settled, and as we move forward with that and getting people to understand, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about spreading the word about the importance of attendance and issues like that. And if we can work with that for a couple of years and turn that around, then that might be something we can look at, you know, later on. But for right now, that's where we're seeing that huge need.
Yeah, we have Kate with our guidance counselor now, we're not meeting the need. And I think that's something I know it's gotten me frustrating in the past, but just be on the ground doing it, it's more than one person. For sure, and I think that I spend more of my time doing that some days than I do with staff development and things like that.
And I think, you know, part of it is when you have principals and leadership that understand trauma-sensitive classrooms and that type of training, that comes with a different perspective on how you deal with and how you resource schools to support the needs of children, particularly our trauma children. And those needs fluctuate, but they do impact a child and a family's ability to successfully access their education. So.
And another piece of that is, I'm sorry, you know, in looking at some of those students, if we had to put them out of district, if what the costs would be related to that, you know, would be humongous. And there's just so much, you know, that we've done this year, I think, to keep students, you know, in our district and to keep them in the mainstream, utilizing a lot of this support that we now have.
Dr. Page?
Yeah, thank you. So just a matter of completeness, how many current permanent subs do you have, Charles?
Two.
You have two as well?
Yes. And for the most of this year, one of them has been in the same classroom because we've had one of our staff members out on a long term. So we were able to put that person in there and they've served as that.
So I'm just gonna add on one quick thing. So we have, Charter District and West Street have different levels of sped teacher and interventionist. So we have one less interventionist, but one more sped teacher. So I split one of that sped teacher's time with intervention this year. So we're similarly staffed, but I do think we do need to do the technology piece, so I'm going to shift somebody to do that from our business there.
Erin?
Thank you, through you. Regarding the social emotional tier 1 program, would that be a program that would be utilized in both schools?
So I think we're looking district-wide. We're still, you know, we have a meeting coming up, and I'm advocating for it to be district-wide because it's a K-12, but that's a decision to be made. Even if we don't go district-wide, I think we should do it in West Street School, because we have that level of need. And to be proactive and try to put these tiered services in, I think if every kid got that, we might have less tier 2 kids in time. It's just kind of one of those cascading kind of things. Hopefully it's an investment in the future.
The reason I ask is that if we're trying to have equity among the buildings, if we have one system working in one building and then kids moving on from there, to have consistency throughout the district that these are our social emotional tier 1 interventions as a district, I think that's.
And we actually have a meeting coming up next week with all of our guidance personnel and support personnel, and Mrs. Culligan is going to be there as well, and it's going to be all about this and putting something in place, and so that we have something in place for next year. And then we'll look at the funding and what needs to be done for that as we get into it. And we were fortunate this year that there was some grant money available for our PBIS and for our PBIS training, and she bailed us out on that end as well. So giving credit where credit is due, that did help us a lot this year. And what we did with PBIS was through those grants for this year. So moving forward, you know, hopefully we can maybe tie into some of that and then work out what we need. But the plan is to do the same thing in both buildings. Andy's the road.
The other question, I don't know if this has been discussed previously, but I know in educational assistant negotiations, one of the things that we had set into the budget was educational assistants who could substitute into classrooms where, for whatever reason, as educational assistants, and then could also do administrative duties if a secretary was out, could answer the phones, could buzz people in and do all of those things. My understanding is that has never taken place in any of the buildings, is that correct?
That's correct.
So I do speak, so that's one of the backup roles of our family liaison. So I would say just at West Street, we don't have that need per se, although, of course, it'd be nice to have a lot of people. I'm able to augment with our family liaison, things like that, so we've been able, that's why I think we haven't, asked for that, maybe, or at least I haven't asked for that, so.
I think in our building in the district, those level 3 and level 4, the tier 3, tier 4, are with our most needy students. Those are assistants that are assigned to one-on-ones or one-on-twos. So we can't really pull them in that situation because they're the
Right, no,
ones.
these were, these were particular positions that we had budgeted for in addition to those positions. So if someone was out in a special ed classroom and somebody needed to substitute in, rather than having somebody that didn't know the building, didn't know the students, it would be a familiar face and it would create less transition. That-
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
So,
No, it was
it would
budgets
be
in the
in
original
addition.
negotiations.
So that was an outside position, each building was,
It was in the negotiations, but it was another position that was never funded through the budget coming into this year. So
Sorry?
I said that was, the line item budget for educational assistants did include those positions.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Is there anything else from West Street? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to confirm that there is one family liaison at West Street and one at Charlton Street, and Mary doesn't have any yet. Okay. And another question for Ms. Culligan. Do you concur that this type of Tier 1 social and emotional program is really necessary? There really is a strong need for that as well. Do you concur with that?
Absolutely. When we were at the curriculum subcommittee meeting not too long ago with the school committee, I made the point that social emotional learning is almost as important as academics, that we're trying to create a tiered system of support. Tier 1 is just the beginning, where we have integrated with academics, strong social emotional learning programs. We don't have that. We are responding to individual crises and that kind of thing. If we can structure a tiered system of support, 80% of our kids could get, much as we do with academics, a universal prevention and enrichment for social emotional learning. Then we would be able to target and focus our resources on Tier 2 intervention and Tier 3 where you do wraparound. Again, in the most successful districts, this is not a new concept at all. It's just that we have not spent the time and energy to fund it, number one, and also to structure it in such a way that it's integrated into the daily program at the schools. So we're excited about it. We think we can make it happen. We think it will make a substantial difference in the behavioral concerns as they're being seen at the schools at this time.
So based on that, I guess I would agree with Mr. Regan that, yes, West Street needs it, but if it is a K through 12 program, then we really should consider using it in all of our buildings, because obviously the need is there.
So we've just completed the study of social emotional learning programs to see which ones could be standardized, what the data shows in terms of the kind of components that are in them, and we're going to be presenting that at the upcoming meeting that Mr. Latour made a reference to with all guidance in all the schools.
Okay. All right, thank you both. What's that, Madam Chair? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Mr. Regan? Okay. Middle high school? Zero? Mr. Cobb's?
I guess our list is so long, our little notes fell off the bottom, so I'll go through them for you. Working with Colleen on a couple of preferred items, the special education teacher and the 2 educational assistants. Those are collaborative requests, working with special education. We would benefit from another special ed teacher to help reduce those special ed caseloads. And our EAs are stretched very thin right now, and we could certainly use 2 more. Right now, they're all fully assigned, and we're looking to make sure we meet all our legal compliance issues. Our SPED team chair, when the schools were combined to 1, we went from 2 team chairs, one at Wells and one at the high school, to now having just 1 for all 7 grades. We're having legal compliance issues there in terms of scheduling team meetings, making sure the IEPs are up to date. The caseload for one team chair is overwhelming in 7 grade levels. The athletic increases, those were proposed by the athletic director, and they represent effort to make sure we do not go over line items this year, and borrow from Peter to pay Paul to make sure we meet those obligations, as I know that Aaron and Ashley are working together to do at this point. So it's making sure that the line items are appropriately funded. NEASC, Cheryl alluded to already. It is required that we participate in the NEASC accreditation process. Next year would be our self-study year. This would represent stipends for our steering committee, including co-chairs. It's a significant amount of work, a significant amount of writing, a significant number of meetings that need to be conducted to put together the self-study in preparation for the visit the following year. Graduation materials, this represents an increase, again, similarly to the athletic budget, traditionally gone over the line item there and borrowed from other items. So reducing certain line items to make sure that the appropriate line items are funded to the level they need to be. Instructional supplies, an increase. This year we were very prudent and we're under in our instructional supplies, but that didn't represent what we needed to buy. It represented an effort to conserve and just operate at a minimal level. Science textbooks, Cheryl also alluded to. Curriculum review cycle has us looking at science, and that will require textbooks. Many of our books are old, are outdated, don't represent the next generation science standards or the new proposed pathway, which courses are going to be taken which year. And then we continue with some other athletic line items, and Navion's, Cheryl and already talked to at length. I could just add to the Navion's line item that it's also the only program that accepts the Common App for state schools, where a majority of our kids will apply to at least one state school. Navion's is the conduit from our building to that state school in terms of the Common App. Navion's is the only interface that the state schools will allow. I'm sorry, I skipped one item, thank you, Jeff. The IRS test coordinator, that's way up, I lumped the two sped things together. The IRS test coordinator, as most of you know, in November, our second academic dean was transferred down to West Street, leaving us with one academic dean. We have now filled an IRS position for math, and we have the first academic dean. This would represent getting that academic dean position back, but reallocating the duties, pushing it down to an IRS level, and it becomes test coordinator. At the middle high school, we participate in a number of assessments. ANET, whether it's or not, it's ANET next year. AP, obviously the MCAS, PSAT, SAT, start reading. So there's a number of tests that happen grades 6 to 12 that require coordination for administration and also require data oversight in terms of gathering the data, analyzing data, presenting data, reviewing the data cycle with the teachers. It's really a full-time job by itself for 7 grade levels, and right now it's taking a significant amount of time from our academic dean, our math IRS, and at least one of our assistant principals, as well as myself. So rather than having our duties split to cover for the testing, we're proposing that we get that academic dean position back, we restructure it, downgrade it to an IRS position, and make the test work.
Thank you. Questions from Mrs. Earls?
Just a clarification or maybe just information. When you say instructional supplies, what are you talking about?
That's everything from pens and pencils to art supplies for the art room, music supplies, repairing the band equipment or the instruments, graphing paper materials for the tech ed programs, which include the middle school program, wood shop, as well as the high school program, the digital printing, all of it.
I just want to get an idea of what kinds of things were in that category.
As well as science.
Not just paper and pencil.
It's not. As well as lab materials, perishables, science labs, everything that's non-textbook.
Yes, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is not to Mrs. Earls. It just happens that this is on her sheet. And I cannot help but be struck by, this is the only school where we have extracurricular mixed in with curriculum. One cannot study the history of the budget without looking at the philosophy of previous school committees who placed athletics above curriculum, perhaps abetted by former principals. This is incredible. The salaries that are going to athletics. It may be that this is the time to have the discussion as to whether we ought to continue with interscholastic athletics in the Southbridge Public Schools. We've had lots of questions about things tonight that we are required to do by the state. And do we need this? Do we need that? Are you sure we're not using this right? When I submit, if I hadn't brought this up, this would not be brought up. It is incredible. We have, you know, we're talking about school pride. The town needs a sense of pride, which is why, you know, they just hired and raised a salary for a recreation director. We could work with the town. Our students could become part of that pride, the pride of Southbridge. But the amount of money that we're spending on athletics in our school budget borders on the obscene. And unless we address this, if the town says, you are not going to have this, you're not going to have, we're going to cut you, we're going to cut this, that's where we look first, I submit. Not cutting a teacher, not cutting someone who's advancing our students and teaching our students. I know the arguments for athletics in the public schools. I understand them all. But we can achieve those through intramural. And we have health, we have physical education. It's time to look for, if we have to look for cuts, we better start with that extracurricular line item. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Mrs. Quinn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You didn't miss it, Earl. Regarding athletic stipends, you said instead of borrowing from somewhere else to meet line items, how are we $5,863 over, given the stipends are laid out in the contract?
We're not over. Aaron, you have to help me out. I don't know why
I
the
believe
line item doesn't match.
there were, and forgive me if I'm not 100% certain on this. I believe there were additional athletics added, and I believe approved by the school committee. We can check.
I think that's right.
After the
Volleyball was
after
certainly
the
in.
budget
Right.
was created last year.
Mhm.
So there were a couple sports. I want to say volleyball may have been one of them. And I'm not certain exactly which sports that happened. I want
I
to say
think-
over the summer
I
maybe.
think they added a cross-country position.
Yeah, I don't know what they
me.
added some, they added, yeah, okay, well,
They
They
split
split the
cross
boys and
country
girls
into
and
boys
they
and
made-
girls
they-
and they made volleyball.
Right.
yes.
Yep.
So there were some added items after the budget was created last year.
Mhm.
And we are seeking to deal with some of those items right now. At the next school committee meeting, you will see some budget transfers that endeavor to take care of some of the athletics items. I'm not sure if it's all of them. But in meeting with Ashley, we came up with some strategies.
I think a challenge with
creating positions is, we can't create positions without the school committee creating positions. So I think had some of these things been dealt with on the front end, we wouldn't be borrowing and transferring things. So that's a concern.
I think volleyball was approved by school committee.
Position, volleyball coach was a position that was never created. It's in the contract. All those positions need to be created. So whether volleyball was approved or not, that position needs to be created. The same thing is true with any sport. It's a contracted stipend, therefore those positions need to be created by the school committee and then funded. So moving forward, we certainly can't do that.
Madam Chair, just through you to Ms. Quinn. So that means that this has been done
Multiple times.
multiple times without any authority.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then, this I think is for Mr. Osborne. There's no higher in the budget under the athletics. We have, under middle school athletics, senior high officials, and there's nothing budgeted in 2015 or 2016. Is that a different line item somewhere else?
I believe we rolled it into a single line item. That has been rolled into a single line item. There's a lot of, there's been a lot of movement of stipends, talking about moving stipends, changing stipends around. So I think for the time being, I moved that into a single line item to encapsulate all of those. And at the end of the day, it could easily be broken out into two separate line items in the final budget.
Well, do you know what line item that is? Because looking at salaries and coaches and athletics, and knowing that number and having, and then knowing the number for, I know that doesn't add up to then additionally
I
accounting
believe
for
it is in
officials.
middle high school, and I believe it is based on a list I received from the superintendent of athletics, intended athletic stipends for this next year. I'm gonna have to the middle high school. And salary coaches, it is it's got two yellow items in transportation field trips below it. Up above is high school athletics, salary coaches, senior high athletics, high school.
Yeah.
And that is per the stipend sheets I received dated March 5th.
I'm good with that.
Okay,
Officials.
okay. That may still be in the district-wide line item. It has in the past been a district-wide item.
Page 2, under district-wide athletic salaries, coaches,
Page 2? District athletics, game officials, page 2 of the district-wide budget. It is district-wide athletic salaries. There are increases recommended, and that's part of that rolled-up high school athletics line item you see for $68,000 in the high school budget. So my intent is to move those line items to the high school budget. You know, we're at this point, we're trying to think holistically and make sure we get everything in there. Where it specifically is at this specific moment in time is not my most pressing concern. It's been district-wide in the past. Athletics has been oddly split between the middle high school and district-wide, and we've tried to move it where it properly belongs, probably in the middle high school, because that's where most of your varsity, all of your varsity and junior varsity athletics goes. So
I just wanted to ensure that it was
Yeah.
actually in the budget.
Okay, and it is,
My
there is a request to increase it, thank you. Because of all that shifting, it takes me a minute to figure where everything is.
And then on that same line, where would it be under athletic systems, other expenses, senior high athletics? Is that where details and all those things come under? I'm back on the SMHS page.
Oh, yes, I believe that's where a lot of that will go.
And then that's,
Some of it does go, there is an athletics revolving account, some of it can go there as well.
and then you're asking to add the 8,606 to that particular line item for a total of 14,606, is that correct?
Yes.
Is that in the, that is in, yes,
That's in the proposal.
Yeah.
I believe that's the intent, yes.
And while I have you,
That's the request from the middle high school.
this is pertaining to all the schools. My concern with the budget for water and sewer as well as electricity, that hasn't gone up at all, and I don't know if any of you pay electric bills, but my electric bill has gone up about 40%. So I have some concerns that my water and sewer has gone up about 25%, and I've seen no increases into those line items, which is concerning. Is there a thought process behind that?
Yes, electricity has not shown to have gone up, we are trending level on electricity. We have entered into French River Educational Collaborative has entered into an agreement for oil that's significantly below our current rate. So for budgetary purposes, I've lined out sort of all utilities. I believe we're going to be capable of running relatively equal on utilities next year. So some of that oil money can go into water and sewer increases if there are in fact water and sewer increases.
Thank you.
Right.
Is there anything else from Mrs. Ross?
Just one more question, just for, to get all the data for the schools in my mind anyway. So you have currently 3 assistant principals, right?
Yes,
And 1 academic team,
yes,
and how many instructional resource specialists?
one.
1? And how many permanent subs do you have?
2.
How many special ed teachers do you have?
Colleen, you gotta help me out with that. How many special ed teachers do we have? I know we have at the middle school. I believe we're up to 10.
Not including your specialized classrooms.
Okay.
So you have 6 per floor, and then you have life skills, math,
The web program.
2 SOARs, so you're up to 14. There's 4 guidance counselors, Dr. Page.
4 guidance. Thank you.
Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Couple questions for Mrs. Earls. This isn't your handwriting, maybe this is even Cheryl, your chicken scratch, as you called it earlier. Relative to the team sped chair, are we obligated to have a team chair per X number of students, or is it just that there was 2, now there's 1?
There was 2, now there's 1, and there's a need because we are obligated to meet timelines for meetings and for IP reviews. And we're
So
finding
that's where the
it's,
compliance part comes in, and we're not able to do that.
we're not able to do that with 1 for salary
Okay.
grade levels.
I can tell you that compared to, averages, the caseload is very high up there, very high. Higher than what is recommended to maintain compliance. So although we're not mandated to have a certain caseload per team chair, it's recommended that we stay in compliance.
So right now, the team chair that you have is 7 through 12, would we?
6.
Oh, 6 through 12, okay, I'm sorry. Would you, if we were able to get a second team chair, would you have
Split
one?
for middle.
Be middle,
Yes.
okay. Just with the priority squares along each of your requested.
I don't know what all those
I
codes
don't know
are,
what the
but.
Ds mean.
District, I believe D's moved to district priority.
These
Sarah?
potentially, it's a district
District.
priority. 1 is priority 1, it's the first thing that we want to keep.
I'm not sure
2
what
is
the
the
X's
second thing we
are.
want to keep, 3 is the third.
It's just
So-
like athletic supplies, fees, transportation, how is that a district issue? I mean, I think it's more school related.
Sure, I mean, it's been district in the past, so it's a district conversation piece rather than just a school. So it's not something that, it's something that's being handled on the district level as opposed to Principal Earls really helping determine what that outcome's gonna be. There's gonna have to be a district decision around athletics and how we're going to fund that.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. And then we always hear about the textbooks, and we always say science, but, and again, because that's the curriculum review is for science, but are there needs, are there other needs in other subjects?
Yeah,
It's
if
not
we
just
had,
science,
right,
obviously.
if we had
Just
an
wanna make sure
unlimited
that-
budget, I would love to have,
Yeah.
we have social studies history books that are falling apart. We have class sets in many areas where I'd love to have students be able to take some books home. So, yeah, if we had unlimited funds, that would be a higher
Okay.
request.
Thank you. That's all I have. Yeah, I'm all set. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Sayers.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Abrams?
One
Oh,
follow-up.
I was going to, right, first, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
On athletics, maybe to Mrs. Earls, how many of the coaches are teachers in our system?
You have to give me a second to go through it in my
Okay.
head, but the majority of it. The majority of coaches are teachers. The football, in our system, currently in the football program, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the program are teachers. Cross-country are both teachers. No, just the girls, just the girls. Volleyball works in our system, she's not a teacher, but she works in our system. Basketball, no. One is a sub in our system. No. Another teacher in basketball. Soccer, a teacher. Boys soccer, a teacher. Tennis are both teachers. Baseball is a teacher. Softball is a teacher. So the majority.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I'm just trying to go through them, but.
That's
So the
okay.
majority of coaches are teachers or work in our system.
Okay. And to Mr. Osborne, a lot has been said, or a lot is said about pure per pupil spending. Is there a way that we can determine the per pupil cost of our athletic program?
We could do that, we could pull out all of the athletic items and do an analysis of that based on the number of students we have in the district. We could do it based on the number of students we have at the middle high school, given that it's predominantly a middle high school item. I could probably do that fairly quickly if that was asked for.
That certainly will be some information that, should we be looking to make cuts, that I'd want to have, so, in the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Can I go to Christopher, just because you...
I think along the lines, we've been talking about where the needs are. We know the needs are at the schools. And I think probably looking at realigning our higher headquarters, instead of taking away from the kids, be it textbooks, be it teachers, fed teachers, athletics, with trying to figure out the per student cost, you probably want to figure out what the cost is when we're going to have to pay for these students to go out of district when we don't have a sports program. I think looking at cutting some of these things that the kids thrive on now will be detrimental to our school district. I think looking at other places to cut money is probably the smarter way to go.
Dr. Page and Mr. Abrams.
Yeah, I just had a question. In terms of textbooks, for science, or for actually all subjects, do you have adequate materials for your AP courses and your honors courses in terms of their textbooks and whatever resources they need?
Do we have optimal resources? No, we don't have optimal resources, especially in science and history.
And are you talking about AP and honors?
Yes,
Are those?
those are curriculum review cycles yet to come up.
Okay, so they're not budgeted, there's no requisition for those for this?
Well, the science would include,
Science includes
yes,
that.
there's none for history.
But the other ones, so
Right.
we're deficient in history and others as well. That's something I think to be cognizant of as well. I mean, The thing is, these students need to be prepared to go to college, and it's up to us to be providing them with the resources they need in order to be successful. And it doesn't do us any good to offer them an AP course and not give them the opportunity to pass the AP exam.
Nor does it make sense to offer interscholastic sports when they don't have a textbook. If we're talking about meeting the needs of the students, Madam Chair, I'm not suggesting right now that we get rid of sports. That's not my thing. I'm suggesting that we need to have that discussion. We need to at least say they had spent years being untouchable. That's clear. So we need to delve into this a little bit and find out if the students are benefiting to the extent that their parents are from having these sports teams. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else for Mrs. Earl? I'll just chime in on that kind of discussion, kind of in the middle. I think there's absolutely a value to well-rounded students, and I think that includes emotional well-being, physical well-being, and all of that. But I do think there are opportunities to look at certain sports. I know that the school, because of school choice numbers, because of the fact that we do not have some feeder programs for some sports, we're trying to put together teams that we really have no business putting together because it does not make sense anymore. So we're trying to stick a bunch of students on varsity teams when they're in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then the students are overwhelmed by their competitors that we're playing, and they don't win, and they get frustrated, and then what purpose does that serve? So I think you gotta kind of look at that strategically, maybe poll the students, what are you interested in, what are you not? And what they're interested in, you keep, you try and maintain, and what they're not, goes away. Because there are some programs we just don't have theaters for in this community anymore, for a lot of different reasons. It's not the school's fault, that's just what happened. So, you're trying to put together a baseball or softball team, for example, and you have no Lassie League program in town. So, there you have a few kids that are dedicated, love it, but by and large, they're trying to piece together some sort of team just for the sake of having a team where we have to pay for transportation and we have to pay for the stipends and we have to pay for everything. Is that really the best use? So I'm kind of a hybrid in the middle. It's not an all or nothing to me. It's kind of what is the need for the kids? I guess volleyball was introduced. That was hugely successful, as I understand it. And that's a relatively low-cost sport to maintain. Some may be others, but that's, again, a discussion we can have some dedicated time to. I think there's middle ground there. Is there anything else from Mrs. Earls?
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
If we'd like to suspend the rules to allow a town council to ask a question, we
So
can do that.
moved.
Second.
There's a fellow in the back that wants to speak.
Yes.
We're working on it.
So, Mr. Abrahamson has made a motion to suspend the rules to allow Councilor Steves to ask a question. It was seconded by Mrs. Donovan. Mrs. Quinney, I'm sorry. All in favor, we can do this by a show of hands for the school committee. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Steves.
This is primarily directed at Mrs. Earl, but I guess it's to all of the principals. Based on the discussion you guys have been having, I guess Mrs. Scripsack actually brought up the question, specifically, it's kind of a two-part question, about field trips. And I was wondering, how much do you guys put into field trips right now, funding-wise? What kinds of field trips, specifically academic kinds of field trips, do the students actually get on a regular basis?
Well, right now it's a district line item, but I believe you're moving to break it out, Aaron,
Yes.
to schools, which will actually be beneficial to us, I think, four of us. As we look at next year, we'll have a better idea of how we can allocate those field trips. The kind of field trips we do at the high school, they involve our arts programs. Our music department will take a field trip or two to a college, or they'll go and play in a parade, etc. All that comes from that line item because of the transportation. We have some academic-based field trips. For example, our middle school was offered the opportunity at a very low cost to help me out with the nature sanctuary right over the border.
Nature's Classroom.
That's it. They were, so we got a low-cost deal for them to go to Nature's Classroom, but there was some cost and always bus transportation issues when they go. So those are the kinds of field trips.
So you get a chance like to get into Boston or New York?
Yeah,
something
their
that
kids will go to
would
the State House,
Yeah.
that's a trip, student government trip. We competed in the high school quiz bowl this year at WGBH in Boston. There's a field trip proposed for next year for New York, but it just hit my desk, so I'm still looking at that. So,
be- And the follow-up question is specifically to Mrs. Earls. You mentioned social studies and history textbook needs. What would it actually cost you to meet the needs you have for social studies and history textbooks?
It would probably be similar to the science proposal, minus somewhere between 10 and 15,000 because of the additional materials required for the science curriculum. And as much as an additional 100,000 probably.
How out of date are the books are we talking about?
Depends on the grade level. In middle school, we have a couple of books that are out of date and in bad shape, less so at the high school level.
And how much does your curriculum cover specifically civics?
The American history class covers civics at both the middle school level and the high school level.
Good.
It's a component of the American history standards.
Thanks.
Yep.
Is there anything else for Mrs. Rose? Do you want to talk about last slide?
Last slide. So the last slide is some budget replacement opportunities that we've been discussing at the central office with the district leadership team. We have discussed eliminating ombudsman with the high school leadership team and creating an internal proprietary district program at a cost savings, which would more fit our need for suspension support, expulsion support, and then pulling our credit recovery back internal and running that more close to home. And that's through the efforts of the high school leadership, so thank you to them. The assessment testing, eliminating the Achievement Network and the Star Reading Program, and working with Northwest Evaluation Association at a cost savings, and that's an estimate because we don't have the final quote from them. But it is an assessment system that allows us to measure student growth. And that's part of the evaluation system, and not something that ANET allows us to do. So the NEA assessment system does allow us to provide growth scores for every student. So I think to Dr. Page's point about, do we know how our highest performing, highest achieving students are doing, and if they're continuing to grow with our instruction, I think is an important piece to stay on top of. And then finally, milepost, the elimination of milepost as a data analysis tool. And the replacement for that is a free tool from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education known as Edwin Analytics. The tricky thing about Edwin Analytics is that if enough districts do not participate, it will become a cost per license. So the encouragement is to get districts to become involved in Edwin Analytics, to provide much of the data analysis that milepost was doing. But again, that may not be a forever zero. But it is right now, so that's our decision. Discussion for us. So, that would be the proposal.
Mrs. Quinn?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to Ms. Stanton. For assessment testing, what is the breakdown between Achievement Network and Star Reading for the $94,000?
So I believe Achievement Network was 82,000, if I remember correctly, and Star Reading was the difference. And point of clarification on Achievement, ANET, that was not fully funded in this year's budget, so that's an additional expense that we've been trying to pick up.
Discussion from Ms. Stanton, or discussion that wants to go ahead in general? Thoughts? Mrs. Donovan?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
just my off-the-cuff overall opinion is that, the first slide that Ms. Stanton presented relative to the two types of budgets that we're preparing and hoping to receive, one being the level service, zero growth, and the other being the needs budget. I think that there is no doubt that that needs budget is what's needed. And we hear a lot of discussion from the town side that, you know, we're not gonna get a whole lot and cuts and cuts and cuts. But at the end of the day, as many people have mentioned it here, talking about what our kids need, what our kids need, what our kids need, what we need for our kids. And this is the budget that we need for our kids. And we may not be able to receive it all, but I think as a collective group, we need to absolutely advocate for a needs-based budget. Because if we're running on empty already and only receive the minimal amount moving forward for this particular year, we're gonna crash and burn. Absolutely gonna crash and burn. And, you know, we're all a part of that. And all of our townspeople are a part of that, and all our elected officials are a part of that. We are fortunate that finally we have the ears of DESE. They're finally hearing the call that we need help. And I think that I'm hopeful and I'm confident that they're going to, you know, everything that they've promised to do to help us with DSAC and other issues, to help us with our level 4 status. But our kids need better classrooms, they need better teachers, they need more teachers, they need resources, they need all the damn help in the world we can give them. So, as far as me as an individual, I will fully advocate for a needs-based budget and pray for the best, but I will no less than a needs-based budget. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think, you know, we just, probably hasn't been time. The superintendent and I have been back and forth with Mr. Osborne a little bit on trying to get some information together that might be a little bit beneficial for all of us to kind of have a look at. I mean, my recommendation would be is that we act on some of those things that we sent out yesterday, and I can potentially review some of them. Some of the things in terms of looking at sort of collectively some of the individual things that we're spending resources on in terms of, so it's hard for me to look at a budget proposal from an in-district academic point of view when it has spread out of district placements in it, it has a lot of district-wide expenses and so forth that are associated with things that are not directly related to what we're doing in district to educate our students. So I don't know whether that makes sense, and I guess this is maybe a question for the superintendent. I have some notes here on it. Yeah, so the thing, and another thing maybe to break out of that is school choice. In terms of, because if we're looking at what our overall budget is on a per basis or whatever, what we're doing here, built into that are the out-of-district special ed placements, the out-of-district expenses for school choice. That doesn't allow us to look at what we're spending on a per-student basis, grade level or building level, in-house, in terms to put the things into a context. And I guess I'm just posing that as a question, is this something I think would be a better analytical way to look at it? Unless I'm missing it.
So when we go to big picture history, those enrollment numbers don't fit, unfortunately, within the context of our school budget. School choice does not show up in there. That's a direct bill to the town.
Okay,
but
out of in here.
That is not in here.
Oh, okay, that's.
No, but out of district is. We are obligated to pay out of district costs, which are the special education costs. The challenges, and this is one of the challenges with looking at it on a per pupil basis sometimes, is how the state calculates per pupil. So they include, in their pupil counts, they include out-of-district kids and school choice kids. and it's hard to pull those out easily for this sort of presentation.
Right,
And-
I think for us to look at it, I think we can pull that.
Yeah,
Because
we
know how
can
many
go
students
further and try to dig
physically in
into
each
that,
building.
yes.
And we know the dollar figures that you're writing checks for out of district, right?
Oh, yeah,
So
yes.
I think we can look at that and kind of put our expenditures in context.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, how it relates to academics. And then the other aspect of that I would recommend pulling out of that type of analysis is the athletics. You know, it may be included in one building's budget overall, and so if I look at what we're spending on average for people in high school, that includes a bunch of money in athletics. It doesn't include what we're spending on academics, whereas like at Eastford Road, Charlton Street, West Street, it's the same number, but we're actually spending less per pupil in high school.
Academically, yes.
Academics.
Yes, you
So
can,
that's
yes.
the way I would, you know,
And we can
my
talk
suggestion
about-
would be to maybe take another look at it and be a little bit more analytical and see where the resources are being allocated. In the same token is how much are we spending on sort of centralized services and maybe trying to accelerate some priorities. For example, you look at just the money we're spending on this building. We talked about this a little bit before.
Yeah.
You know, the faster we can get out of here, the better off we're gonna be. And, you know, I realize there are implications in doing that. We talked about maybe not being able to do it this year. We might want to consider, you know, this
Find us a
could
building.
be a huge, that could be a huge savings.
Madam Chair, could I move to transfer this building to the town? And we could throw in McMahon Field as well. Do you have any objection to that, Conrad? Well, I won't make the motion.
We'll withdraw it.
So that just one.
If I may, I just want to clarify that the school choice isn't in our school budget, this particular thing, but that, rest assured, comes right out of net school spending. So whatever that cost is, before the town allocates us funds, that is already paid for in full. So I know Mr. Osborne said that that's billed to the town, but the town pays it right out of our Chapter 70 budget. So I don't want there to be any misnomers about that the town is paying that and we are not bearing the brunt of that. That money comes directly out of our Chapter 70 budget.
And when we're talking
Very
about
clear.
that 3% over net school spending, that includes out of district.
Right.
And the other sort of comment that I would like to make is, you know, regardless of where we end up landing in terms of the budget, my attitude is that education is an investment, and education requires an investment into any community. And, you know, I just had a full day of training with MASC for charting the course, and they did a lot of reviews of different districts and how they approach the budgetary process and the budgetary outline, and I'd like to try and bring some of that kind of philosophy hopefully here as we move forward. Looking for starting the process a lot earlier for one, so that we're not doing things in kind of a hurry up. But one of the things that was very clear in an analysis that they actually used Southbridge as a comparator to make the point, comparing it to a much more successful district. But the deficiencies in the Chapter 70 formula, which is now under review, that was highlighted as a big one. Southbridge, because of the Stanton presented data earlier that showed we had 3% higher sped population than average. If you look at our total enrollment, that translates to about 60 students. And so that means that's a much bigger number from a dollar amount than it might look like in terms of 3%. And that's not really calculated adequately in the Chapter 70 formula. Right? So those are the things we have to be cognizant of. But what a lot of districts realize is that that minimum net school spending that the state does its calculation and says this is what you need to spend, that's to provide a bare bones type of situation. And most districts on average are about 19% over that on average. Some of them are as high as 100%. Cambridge just doubles it. I mean, that's Cambridge. I mean, I understand the wealthy district and so, but what I think we need to start changing the culture of how we think about education in this community, and that is to try and get it back to where it was, I know where it was probably 15 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, and that is a culture of excellence and a culture of achievement, and people all striving for that. And to hit one of the points raised about the importance or non-importance of athletics, in this district and in all districts, and I see it at the college level, participation in varsity sports is an incredible contribution to the overall well-roundedness of an individual student. I know of very, very few students that I work with on any kind of level at WPI that do not participate in their high school sports. And they have no visions of going on professional careers or whatever. But it's an important component that we look at when we're looking at students to accept into the university. Universities want well-rounded students. They want students that have demonstrated leadership skills, that can work on teams. How do you do that? You play varsity sports, you're team captains, you're things like this, in addition to other academic activities in which you do those roles. So in particular, our district, I know there are a lot of kids who, one of the primary motivations for them showing up and going to school and getting good grades is so they can play basketball, or they can play some kind of varsity sport, or middle school sport, junior varsity sport. So we need to be cognizant of those kinds of things. I'm not saying we're spending, I'm not saying that we should fund it, at the fullest level possible. Maybe take a look at it a little bit and be a little bit more analytical, but I just want to basically state that there are good academic reasons to have sports programs in my opinion.
I would just say, Madam Chair, that I could find an equal number of studies saying that it is not necessarily beneficial. So that's why we need to have a discussion. I mean, I think if we're going to, if we're going to really discuss it, let's find out, first of all, who's participating, how much it's costing, and if that athletic program that I'm talking about, interscholastic, if that is such a major thing for our students, then it should be defendable, shouldn't it? Someone should be able to defend that. And that's all I'm asking. Thank you.
Mrs. Spinner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To build on something that the previous speaker said regarding funding over foundation budget and Chapter 70 funding, one thing that I think as a school district we need to approach the town about is how we determine administrative cost assessment. Right now what the town does is they charge us the administrative cost based on the state average per pupil, which they are clearly not expending. When I asked Roger Hash for the cost breakdown of what we actually spend, we are fairly low in what we do, but they take the average of towns that are giving 19% over. They use these very wealthy towns to calculate that percentage, and then we're being charged that, which I believe for our administrative cost last year was $232,000, which is taken immediately out of our Chapter 70 funding that doesn't get to us. So I think there are a lot of places in which we are being held to different standards. We pay 2% over foundation budget, yet we will take the state average and charge you that. So there are a lot of inequities in that system, and I think we need to, as a school district, approach the town and say, if you'd like to use the state average, we would be more than happy to accept 19% over. However, if you would not like to use the state average, then how are you charging us the state average? That seems ridiculous. And there are little things like that along the way that have just compounded the money available to us and to our students that's not actually getting to our students, that we need to reevaluate more closely. Another area that I think we need to look at is we have office staff who work very hard to procure and to bill for Medicaid services to our special needs students. That time, effort, and energy that is put into creating those bills and putting all of that out, having people turn in billing sheets, then all that money gets turned over to the town. The town keeps those funds. I think that that's another area that is a gross inequity. We're paying to give them money that never then comes back to us. And we're paying for services for people that quote unquote aren't town employees, they're school district employees. They come out of our budget, so we're paying for them multiple times over. So I think that there are a lot of places that we need to be more big picture responsible in looking at the overall, where our money is going, what's that costing us, and if we are doing state averages, maybe we could charge for the special ed students the state average of administrative costs back to the town in order for them to secure that. I think that there are different things that we need to look at in ways that we can better be utilizing those funds and people's time and energy that we're paying them to do to no benefit to the school district or the government. To build on what Mrs. Donovan said, I think this is what our students need. It is, we should at minimum be providing students in our classrooms with what they need. Not exorbitant amounts, what they need. We're not saying it would be great to have this special, wonderful thing. No, this is what they need. When children are hungry, you feed them what they need when you don't have a lot. You give them what they need. You don't give them above what they need, but you give them what they need. To expect a district to pull out of level 4 status to do phenomenal things and provide them with less than what they need is beyond ridiculous to me. And for that to be the expectation, and also to have people say that we're being level funded is just the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard. If you have no raise and all of your bills go up, that's not level funding. The cost of educating students goes up and you're getting less money. That's not level. So just that statement in and of itself is crazy, but I think as a town and as a community, we need to advocate for, at minimum, what collectively. I think if we want this town to be successful, we have to have successful schools. Nobody's gonna move into town with failing schools. People are moving out of town because we have failing schools. If we don't invest in education, in students, then we're gonna have no property taxes because everybody's gonna move out of town. I think it is horrific to think that a community would look at their children and say, you don't deserve what you need. And I think we need to be clear about that, because doing anything less is just selling their future for nothing. That's it. Thank you.
If I may say, I have had occasion to attend the foundation budget hearing and forums that they've had. And those are actually very interesting and very educational to go to understand Chapter 70 funding. They have representatives from the Department of Education, the Department of Revenue, talk about how formulas are established, what schools are getting, that sort of thing. There are some communities that request or technically would get no Chapter 70 funding, but the state has made a commitment because they want to show that the state is invested in every community and the education of everybody in the Commonwealth, that I believe they allocate a minimum of $80,000. So in the town of Southbridge, we have a $25 million budget, but 4/5 of that realistically come from Chapter 70 funding in the state. The town's commitment to the education in this district is small, when you take in the fact that Chapter 70 funding does cover our school choice dollars. And the reason the state gives us more Chapter 70 funding is in recognition of the fact that dollars are going out. So, and in some instances, we actually receive more for school choice students than Chapter 70 funding than what's going out. So, if you really take a per pupil expenditure, what this town is spending on children, use a $6,000 or whatever figure, and that's really what we've decided to do in this community. And I say that because one of the things that it was completely obvious was when they put up all their graphs about net school spending in communities, and they do use Southbridge as an example, but they use a bunch of different communities, different types of socioeconomic levels. It was no contest. The schools that were rising and meeting above minimum net school spending were your high-performing schools in every single instance. There was not one school that was receiving, 25 or 30% above minimum net school spending that was a failing school. But the schools that were receiving less than 10%, all were. All of them. That says something. And I don't know when that message is gonna come across, or when, it's very difficult. There's a lot of needs in a town budget that's so obvious. But our job as a school committee is to advocate for what we think the kids need in this district. And I don't think anything that I saw here was out of line. I think you all did a good job of articulating the needs, of being thoughtful, of trying to prioritize what's needed. You gave us examples, look, if you can't fund that, could you at least fund this type thing? And I sincerely appreciate your effort. And I, like Mrs. Donovan, I'm gonna advocate for this needs-based budget. Like you said, we may not get there this year, but we need to really be consistent in that message of what we need to do here in the district. So, anybody else? Okay, do you have anything?
I appreciate the support. Again, I'd like to say thank you to the principals and the leadership teams in the schools for developing the budget. Like Dr. Page, I would like to start earlier next year, and also be more in line with the town and what their expectations are earlier, bringing town people to our building-based budget meetings early so that they can hear what some of the needs are, and they can be part of the process and understand it as the needs are discussed.
Just some timelines for people here. I had heard, but I have not been able to get confirmation of this, maybe one of the town councils can help me, that on Monday the town manager was going to present the budget. Is that true or not?
I think if I remember correctly, he said he was gonna present the kind of basic budget.
Yeah,
but
just to get it started.
Yeah, and that's
Conversation.
obviously, the big conversation is gonna go to the subcommittee
Sure.
after that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that's coming up, I believe, on Monday. On April 1st, we are looking at, working with EHS to schedule that subcommittee meeting to talk about the school budget. So.
I haven't seen anything from you on it yet, so.
Okay.
We were gonna do something about it yesterday, for tomorrow, but it got canceled.
Okay, thank you for that. And we discussed earlier today at an agenda preparation meeting, holding a public hearing for the budget. April 14th, we have a school committee meeting that night. We would hold the hearing prior to the meeting at 6:30. So those are tentative dates right now for everything, but I just wanted to make you all aware of that. And as I get confirmation or as those things change, I'll be sure to forward that on to you. Anything else? Thank you all. Everybody, can I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, everybody.
Second.
Motion second, give it to anybody you want. Okay. Say your hand. All in favor? Show of hands, all in favor? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.